Clearly, he explained that mandatory sentence cannot be applied to someone who's left office. The entire process revolves around removal. If removal becomes impossible, conviction becomes insensible. In one light, it certainly does seem counterintuitive that an office holder can elude Senate conviction by resignation or expiration of term, an argument we heard made by the managers. But this underscores that impeachment was never meant to be the final forum for American justice. Never meant to be the final forum for American justice. Impeachment, conviction, and removal are a specific intra-governmental safety valve. It is not the criminal justice system where individual accountability is the paramount goal. Indeed, Justice Story specifically reminded that while former officials were not eligible for impeachment or conviction, they were, and this is extremely important, still liable to be tried and punished in the ordinary tribunals of justice. Put another way, in the language of today, President Trump is still liable for everything he did while he was in office as an ordinary citizen. Unless the statute of limitations is run, still liable for everything he did while he was in office. Didn't get away with anything yet. Yet. We have a criminal justice system in this country. We have civil litigation. And former presidents are not immune from being accountable by either one. I believe the Senate was right not to grab power the Constitution doesn't give us. And the Senate was right not to entertain some light-speed sham process to try to outrun the loss of jurisdiction. It took both sides more than a week just to produce their pretrial briefs. Speaker Pelosi's own scheduling decisions conceded what President Biden publicly confirmed: a Senate verdict before Inauguration Day was never possible. Now, Mr. President, this has been a dispiriting time. But the Senate had done our duty. The framers' firewall held up again. On January the 6th, we returned to our posts and certified the election. We were uncowed. We were not intimidated. We finished the job. And since then, we resisted the clamor to defy our own constitutional guardrails in hot pursuit of a particular outcome. We refused to continue a cycle of recklessness by straining our own constitutional boundaries in response. The Senate's decision today does not condone anything that happened on or before that terrible day. It simply shows that senators did what the former president failed to do. We put our constitutional duty first.
The senator from Maryland.
If you're just joining us, you've been watching the Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell delivering remarks on the floor of the Senate after the Senate votes to acquit Donald J. Trump of incitement of insurrection. Jillian?
President Trump is releasing a statement just now on the Senate's acquittal. It reads in part, quote, "This has been yet another phase of the greatest witch hunt in the history of our country. No president has ever gone through anything like it." And it continues because our opponents cannot forget the almost 75 million people, the highest number ever for a sitting president, who voted for us just a few short months ago. All right, to talk about this, let's bring in Brad Blakeman. He's former deputy assistant to President George W. Bush and a Bush-Cheney campaign advisor. Blake, thanks so much for joining us right now. This was not, I think I can speak for most of us when I say this was not the speech we were expecting from Senator McConnell immediately on the heels of President Trump's acquittal. I mean, he really went after him in these remarks.
He did, but he made a cogent argument as to why this proceeding was unconstitutional. It was a procedural argument, yet he laid out the culpability of the president in the rioting that occurred that day. And it was the perfect blend of reality versus the fiction that we've just been through with Democrats. This is an unconstitutional act. Just because a bunch of senators get together and say it's constitutional doesn't make it so. We have an arbiter of the Constitution, and that is the Supreme Court. And they never ruled as to the procedural aspect of this trial. Senator McConnell was right. When the indictment came in from the House, the article of impeachment, we had a sitting president. That was Donald J. Trump. But when we had the trial, he was not. He's an ordinary citizen. And Leader McConnell, quite frankly, was correct in interpretation of Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution, that we cannot proceed against a trial for a person who's no longer the president. There's nothing to be removed. He's gone. And that's what Democrats could never get over, the fact that they needed to get even with Donald Trump. They needed to enact revenge against Donald Trump. And who won today? The Constitution. That's what won today. This nightmare is over for the American people. It's time to get beyond this if Democrats can manage to do it. We've wasted 3 weeks of a new presidency, bogged down. And meanwhile, the pandemic continues. We have Americans out of work. This is the work that should be done now. And I'm hoping that Democrats can just let Donald Trump go and get on with the business at hand.
So, Brad, let me ask you, because you mentioned the Article 2, Section 4, and that is what Mitch McConnell cited as the reason why he voted to acquit. After, as Jillian pointed out, McConnell spent a lot of time really going after Donald Trump, saying that as the riot unfolded, in the chaos ensued, that it was Trump and Trump alone, the only one who could stop it. And then at one point, McConnell mentioned that there's nothing to suggest that the criminal justice system can't prosecute a former president. So essentially saying that we in this esteemed body, under the strict constitutional reading of that section, could not find a conviction, but yet maybe the president would be prosecuted later.
That remains to be seen, but certainly Leader McConnell was correct in the fact that the forum was inappropriate. To have a Senate trial on articles of impeachment that are invalid on its face. You can't have a trial if procedurally the articles of impeachment are moot because the former president is just that, a former president, an ordinary citizen. And Mitch McConnell, he took the gloves off, just like he did prior to the trial, when he went to the floor and said Donald Trump has culpability in the riot. But the remedy is not an impeachment trial. There may be some other remedy outside the Senate, and that may occur or may not occur. It remains to be seen.
Their real culpability lies in the leadership, including Senator McConnell and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, and no one will know exactly who did what, when, where, and how until there is a proper investigation of not calling in the National Guard when it should have been called in 2 or 3 days, or if not at least 1 day before this event even took place. Shame on them. Because but for them, this would never have happened.
It's not entirely clear here that he's vindicated, in the Democrats' words, according to Democrats we're talking to. What do you make of that?
Democrats will never be happy.
That's right. They are haters.
Heard it from the presiding officer of the Senate that Donald J. Trump is acquitted. it really doesn't matter.
They tried to make it racist. They tried everything they could try.
The 7 Republicans
The Democrats did.
joined in that vote because
The
they never
haters.
achieved the supermajority needed of 3/4 of the Senate to convict.
Well,
He's
Brad,
acquitted, and that will
except
never
I have to point out, though, in that statement I just read you from former President Trump himself, he lost the general election, but he's still touting the fact that he had the most votes for a sitting president's reelection in history. So if those votes count, then the votes today got to count, right? Make it fair?
Well, look, you can argue it 6 different ways, but the bottom line is history will show Donald Trump was impeached by the House, and he wasn't convicted by the Senate. You know, Democrats will never be able to get beyond Trump, and hopefully by his acquittal, this will be one step in that direction for the good of the country.
Twice he's been acquitted.
Well, Brad, Democrats could not get 17 Republicans to cross the aisle. That was the magic number they needed, 67 votes to convict. But 7 Republicans did. 5 of them, Collins, Murkowski, Sass, Toomey, not a surprise there. But 2 of them, Richard Burr and Bill Cassidy, were a bit of a surprise. What does this, first, what is your reaction, and what does this
Shameful,
mean
all of
going
them.
forward for the GOP?
Well, the GOP will get beyond the Trump era, that is for sure. Like every former president, the party needs to regroup. There'll be new leaders emerging, and the party will continue. The Democrats are in more disarray, I would allege, than the Republicans are, because now they have to control all 3 branches of government, and you see the deep divisions within the Democrats on how they should proceed in governance. So I'd much rather be a Republican today than a Democrat.
That's for
Brad,
sure.
Before we let you go, we want to ask you to just take a sort of look into the future for us here. Does this vote leave Republicans more united than they've been over the last few weeks, or at least since the beginning of November anyway?
Well, I think this is a good day for the country because the Constitution prevailed. It's up to Republicans now to regroup as a party. We have a big tent, and we have to get beyond the Trump era, just like we do when we get beyond former presidents who are the leaders of our party. There are going to be new leaders, and that's going to be our mission, to field great candidates, to stand up to Democrats in their more progressive policies that we're going to now see and hopefully get focused on now that this is behind us.
And Donald Trump will still be able to run for president in 2024.
Right, and we're going to regroup over here on this end. Brad, thanks for sticking with us. We'll check back with you next hour. Thanks so much.
If he wishes.
Let's bring in our legal panel now. Kimberly Whaley, a professor at the University of Baltimore School of Law, a former assistant U.S. attorney, and a former associate independent counsel in the Whitewater investigation. And Saul Weisenberg, former deputy independent counsel and Fox News contributor. Thank you for taking time. What a historic day. Saul, I'd like to start with you. Your reaction to what we just watched.
Well, I think I would like to focus on something. If you're talking about Senator McConnell in his speech, what he just said, he talked about, as your previous guest pointed out, the possibility of criminal investigations. The House put on a pretty good show, the House managers, over the last few days. And one of the things I was thinking about when I was looking at it is the federal crime of accessory after the fact. What do you do?
Oh, get serious, buddy.
About an ongoing crime and
Goodness gracious sakes alive. Give it up. You dingbats can't find anything to do but attack Donald Trump. Try to keep him from running again. Like a bunch of little children, you and the Lincoln group.
A real criminal investigation to be conducted by the acting U.S. attorney in D.C. But if it holds up, you could end up having, if you so chose, a decent accessory after the fact case against the former president. You would not have to worry about...
There's no proof of any of that nonsense. Just spreading that gossip to try to keep things aroused. Shame on you. Well, if you're saying it's not true, then why are you even saying it? Because you're a Trump hater.
That the defense really relied on throughout this trial was sort of spreading the blame around, saying essentially, well, if you're going to call President Trump and hold him responsible for saying, let's fight, let's take this fight to the people, you know, then you've also got to hold Democrats like Maxine Waters and Cory Booker and Elizabeth Warren. Even Kamala Harris appeared in one of the videos.
Yes, and so is Joe Biden, and so is Chuck Schumer.
What helped them get to the victory they got to this
All
afternoon?
of them are.
You know, I don't. I mean, I think Mitch McConnell just sort of tried to have it both ways. On the one hand, he made a technical argument admitting it was ambiguous under the law as to whether it was constitutional to hold the trial. Of course, he was the reason the trial didn't start prior to the inauguration because he was in charge. But then at the same time said that Donald Trump acted recklessly, that he abdicated his constitutional responsibility, and as Saul said, basically offered him up as a potential criminal defendant moving forward, which is quite serious. I think, you know, as a constitutional law professor, I think we all have to take a deep breath and stand back and look at the Constitution itself. There's a big difference between a criminal trial and what we just saw and what impeachment is, which is really deciding, we the people, where's the line of conduct that we're okay with for any president. It's basically defining a job description for the presidency, and this definitely, in that regard, leaves us all open to something like this happening again, so long as it's towards the end of a term, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican. And of course, as we heard in the trial, we've seen rioting, you know, across the political spectrum, and I don't like that picture for America either way. And it seems like that picture has been given the green light, at least from the standpoint of the U.S. Congress. They're punting it to other parts of the executive branch.
Right.
That is the U.S.
Get the
attorney,
elections straightened up where the vote tallies are have transparency and honest.
And ask you, because we did see McConnell citing Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution, why he voted to acquit. But is it possible that had it not been incitement for insurrection and something more along the lines of dereliction of duty, it might have had a different outcome?
No, I don't think it would have. If I could respond to one point that Kimberly made, and we're old friends. That's why I can call her by her first name, and that's that. I don't think I think that's a bum rap on McConnell delaying, because from what I understood at the time, first of all, they didn't send the article of impeachment over right away, but also my understanding was the Senate was in recess at that point, and he would have needed the unanimous consent of his Republican senators. He couldn't even get anything close to unanimous consent when he tried to get them to drop their objections to certification. So I'm not certain about that, but I think I recall reading that. It would have been awfully late to put on a trial, an actual trial, before Inauguration Day. That's number one. But number two, also kind of in some opposition to what Kimberly is saying, and that is, yes, you can look at it as a bad example that was set by acquitting President Trump. But I think it's important to put on your case. I think the House managers put on a very powerful case against him, even if you believe technically that you cannot convict a president once he leaves office. That a lot of people watched that presentation. It was powerful. It's going to affect, I believe, President Trump's reputation and his popularity, even among some people in his base.
Not hardly, buddy. That's what you're interested in, and Haley, that's what Senator McConnell unfortunately is interested in. Nobody that's in that group of Republicans, rhinos are called, they don't want Donald Trump to come back. Never have wanted him to be there in the first place. They are anti-Trumpers. Well, 75 million and more, coming all the time, are people who like what Donald Trump did as president. And this all false attacks from whether it's Russia, investigations and after investigations, impeachments after impeachment. The American people appreciated what Donald Trump did by keeping his word and fulfilling his promises. And I hope he runs again. And I hope he runs again with Mike Pence.
The defense argument was, under the First Amendment, that you take a snapshot of January 6th and the words that came out. I think what the Democrats were trying to do is say, listen, incitement requires a wider lens.
Right.
That over a period of weeks that he called people to to the Capitol on January 6th, and we saw testimony from people in the crowd. We know, as Saul mentioned, there are people that are indicted. The indictments indicate belief from his followers that they were doing the patriotic thing to come to the U.S. Capitol and serve the Constitution in their minds because they were answering to their president. And I think the defense argument was, and it's very clear in the briefs as well, those people are on their own. We're leaving them twisting in the wind. They're criminals. They went off the script. Trump had nothing to do with that. And it doesn't, I think we can use our common sense that leadership does matter, and that actually leaders do have to be held accountable, maybe to even a higher standard than people that are following leaders. So
that's why he said, go march over peacefully like patriots.
Would have made a difference. I think they chose this charge to deflect the argument that it's not per se not a high crime and misdemeanor. No one argued that incitement of an insurrection doesn't qualify as a high crime and misdemeanor, which we saw the last round. But I would have liked to see some witnesses, frankly. This wasn't a traditional trial. It wasn't a real trial. And I think Americans deserve to see what from firsthand accounts, not only what it was like, but the police officers. I mean, the police officers were also...
Well, who stopped the witnesses? It was the Democrats again. They started and then they backed off because they knew that they could not afford to bring in witnesses that would tell the truth about who all this responsibility belonged to. Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, the mayor of Washington, D.C., Bowser, and perhaps even Mitch McConnell as the leader of the Senate at that time. But under oath they should all be put, and so should their assistants.
Interesting. So, Kimberly and Saul, we've got to leave it there for now.
Got to leave it there for now.
Come back to you again later
John Stephenson here, travels with the Stephensons.
Sure thing.
Yeah, we're trial lawyers. We're used to taking anything that comes our way, and we shift, pivot, adjust, and move forward, and that's exactly what we did.
Michael, I want to ask you, we've read the statement from former President Trump on our air, but have you talked to your client, and what was his initial reaction to you?
I don't discuss any attorney-client communications in any way.
Well, would it be fair to say that the president is reacting positively to what he saw and what has transpired today?
I would assume that is what he's doing. He had a good day in court today. He was vindicated. He was found not guilty. The political witch hunt that they had, that the Democrats had thrown at him, was defeated. So he should feel quite pleased.
And I'm pleased
Michael,
too.
One of the things that you and your colleagues referenced over and over again during the course of this week was that there were really 4 core reasons for senators to acquit President Trump. When you look back on how things have unfolded, which of those arguments do you think senators relied on the most? Was it this idea of the unconstitutionality of the trial? Was it falling back on the president's own First Amendment rights? What do you think made the big difference?
That's a really good question, because it was very interesting. We had to go with all 4 grounds of acquittal because different senators had different interests. And, for example, some senators' due process was absolutely important and proved the merits of their case.
Johnny.
Held they were right when they thought that way. And of course, the Senate
Hello.
23,
Hang on a second, hon.
in black and white.